Tyranny. When you hear the word tyranny, is that a good thing or a bad thing? Are there positive connotations with the word tyranny in your mind, or are there negative connotations over the word tyranny? Would you want a tyrannical ruler over you? Would you want if you're a woman, a tyrannical husband? Would you want a tyrannical wife if you're a man? Would you want a tyrannical pastor? Would you want a tyrant leading the government? So if you're 99% of people, you recognize that tyranny is kind of a bad word. And I've been discussing how certain words are being twisted by a certain group of people recently. Marxists, the people who are always twisting words, it's the Marxists. But these new Marxists are people who like to wear a conservative disguise, pretending to be on the right wing, but they are exactly the same kind of Marxists that have always existed. And they use identity politics, and they create groups in their heads out of superficial characteristics like race or like age or any other class category. Marxism started with the elites versus the lower class, the working class versus the upper class. And Marxism, ever since it was created, was used to turn your group, whatever your group is, into some kind of oppressed category, and the enemy's group, turn them into some kind of villain, saying that they're oppressing your group. And by turning them into a kind of villain, you get to actually, in reality, oppress them. And this is what Marxism has always done. Back in 2020, Marxism took the form of Black Lives Matter and social justice, and it's been trendy in the past couple of decades, at least, trendier, to use racial categories to divide people and to oppress your enemies. And over the past couple of decades, it became more trendy to oppress white people. And now the idiot white people who have probably just a couple of brain cells to knock around have thought, okay, so maybe we are the oppressors, and maybe everybody else is evil who doesn't look like us. And so they are using the same Marxist tactics to try to take people to their side, to confuse people, to manipulate people, and to ultimately oppress and destroy the people that they disagree with. And I've looked at a couple other words on videos, and the word that I want to look at in this episode is tyranny. I've had less time to prepare. I've had a busy past couple of weeks, so I haven't been able to put out podcasts as much recently. But if you look at my comment section on posts about tyranny on my X page, or just on YouTube in general, whenever I talk about the Marxists inevitably skitter out from the cracks in the floor like cockroaches to defend their own, using absolutely lacking any kind of reasonable argument whatsoever. And so, of course, it'll probably happen in the comment section of this video, because they can't help but spread their nonsense. Because I think the vast majority of them are fully indoctrinated at this point by the people that they follow, the podcasters that they listen to, the fake pastors who they follow, utterly disqualified, vile, awful individuals who encourage this kind of thought and behavior. But anyway, tyranny. So if you look up in any dictionary, I wasn't able to find a single dictionary that gave tyranny a positive spin. So I'm going to be honest, I hate straw men, and the last thing I want to do is to straw man my opponents. I want to completely eradicate their bad arguments fair and square. And so I don't need a straw man. What they do have with the word tyranny is the original meaning of the word on their side, sort of, and we'll talk about that. So the word tyranny comes from the word tyrannos, which at the time merely meant an absolute ruler. a ruler unbound by constitution or law, the ruler who was themselves the law. Instead of lex rex, it was rex lex. The king is the law, and not the law is king. And obviously this is not a Christian idea whatsoever, but the argument goes like this. So tyrannos, because these same kinds of people are obsessed with the Greek Empire and homosexual Sparta and things like that. And so because they're obsessed with these old ancient civilizations, which there are lots of things honestly to admire about, there's also a lot of danger and a lot of things that we can recognize are bad ideas, because the Greek and Roman empires, not until much later in their history, were influenced by Christianity and actually turned into something resembling a good Christian lawful place. And then even then, if it actually arguably happened at all, it only happened for a very brief period of time until it collapsed and fell apart and was taken over by barbarians. But that's neither here nor there. Tyranny originally just meant this absolute ruler, and the word tyranny was applied mainly just to the emperor alone, because he was the only person who could be an absolute ruler. And the argument goes as this from these people professing to be Christians, that Jesus Christ is a tyrant in the original meaning of the word. Jesus Christ is an absolute ruler. He rules over everything. He is completely above the law in every way. And therefore, because we are to imitate Christ, we need to be tyrants in our marriage. We need to have tyrants over our government. We need to have a good Christian tyrant, because that's the thing that will right all of the the problems in our world. Not repentance, not biblical truth, but we need somebody who professes to be a Christian, who claims absolute authority, which isn't actually a very biblical idea, because again, the only person with absolute authority is Christ. So although I don't really like it, let's just run with that definition to say Christ is a tyrant. So I disagree. I wouldn't say that, but let's roll with it and see if there are any fundamental internal inconsistencies with this idea. So if Christ is a tyrant and he is above the law, then and therefore we need some kind of Christian tyrant to model Christ and do that kind of thing. Having another tyrant who is above the law would necessitate being above Christ's law. And if they're not, so you could say, well, no, we need a tyrant, but we need a tyrant who is actually under God's law, then they cease to be a tyrant. Because the word tyrant means that they are above the law, means that they are an absolute ruler. If they are under the law of Christ, then they're not an absolute ruler, because Christ is the only absolute ruler. So even if you take their definition at face value of tyranny, the old definition, which the Greeks were wrong about, the Romans were wrong about, there is no such thing as an absolute ruler aside from Christ. Now, obviously, because we in our modern society have actually grasped this idea that liberty is important and self-governance is valuable, and that there is no such thing as an absolute ruler, and that the law needs to be over our rulers and not the other way around, then we have actually developed this very valuable and very Christian idea that tyrants are bad. So if you look in any dictionary, like I said, I couldn't find a single dictionary that didn't have a negative connotation for the word tyrant. It will say, you'll find something like a cruel and unjust ruler, an absolute ruler, things like that. Even on X, somebody said, like, that's not what tyrant means. Tyrant just means an absolute ruler. And I said, okay, here's a dictionary definition that says otherwise. And he, being the galaxy brain that these people are who love tyranny, because you have to be an utter moron to love tyranny of any kind, obviously. He found another dictionary that actually agreed with my definition of it, with the definition that 99% of people agree with, that tyranny is actually a bad thing. It's stupid that we even have to, that even a video is necessary about this, because obviously tyranny is bad, right? Nobody is an absolute ruler over anything. But anyway, this galaxy brain, woke right, brain dead moron, whatever. He went to another dictionary. Maybe he researched tremendously well, and he just couldn't find any definitions that actually disagreed with me. Who knows? I mean, that's giving him as much grace as possible. What I assume he did the absolute laziest option, which was to find any dictionary definition. And what he had to do was to crop out the section that disagreed with me. The section that said, a cruel and unjust ruler. So anyway, he shared this definition, and I spent every bit of 5 seconds to Google this dictionary just because I was curious. I found the same dictionary he used. It was one of the front page of Google ones because they all have approximately the same definition. They all recognize that tyranny is a bad thing. And I realized, he's being deceptive. And ironically, he called me being deceptive. He was saying I was deceptive because I'm using the common definition that 99% of people accept. So the fact is, tyranny is bad. Tyranny in the common definition of the word is bad. And even if you take the original definition where cruelty is not baked into the definition, if you take the original definition that merely means absolute ruler, it's still bad. It is still contradictory to the Christian worldview. It's still contradictory to the American worldview. And these people, they love history, or well, they claim to love history. If a person actually loved history, they would get history right, And so these people who claim to love history, they twist the meanings of words because they want to manipulate you, because they're Marxists. Because, like I've said before, Marxists want to manipulate you, and they want to control you, and they want to control everything. And one of the best ways to control everything is to control the dictionary. We saw the left do this, and we're seeing the leftists today do this who pretend to be on the right. Because also one of the most effective attacks from a group comes from within. That's one of the most effective ways to destroy some kind of good thing, to take a Trojan horse into the group, and then to reveal your poison and take everybody out from the inside. I think that's exactly what these people are doing. So in other words, all that to say, tyranny, obviously a bad thing. These people are trying to manipulate you. All of this kind of is a pattern of the same kinds of people who love tyranny. They want you to think that only white people can be Americans. They want you to think that anybody who doesn't look like you is either evil or they're cursed, or exclusively people who look like each other have to stick with their own, which has gospel implications. Even this idea of tyranny has gospel implications. And while I'm not the kind of person who, one of the quote-unquote gospel-centered people who needs to say like, well, everything, we want to just be centered on the gospel. That's not what I'm doing at all. But there are some very fundamental realities that I think have very deep and serious implications that if you get these wrong, like if you think tyranny is a good thing, you're very close, if not there already, to getting the gospel wrong. If you think that people who don't look like you can't actually become a member of the kind of nation that God prescribes in the Bible, you are, if not you're already there, you're very close to getting the gospel wrong. So that's not me saying everything is the gospel. This is me saying the gospel is a very specific thing, but there are certain ideas that if you get those wrong, you are in deep danger, if not already there, of getting the gospel itself wrong. And loving tyranny, believing that people are absolute rulers over the law, is absolutely one of these things. Because Christ is king, and there is no king, no ultimate king, but Christ. And any ruler, and there are rulers that God appoints, obviously, that however a nation's government runs, if it is within the biblical bounds, and I think there are various kinds of acceptable governments, let's say. The rulers of those various kinds of, there are definitely some that are better than others, but the rulers of those various kinds of governments are responsible to God, and they are supposed to be in submission to God. They are supposed to wield the sword on behalf of God. They're not supposed to be over the law itself. They're supposed to be in submission to the law. They are not an absolute ruler in any definition of the word. They shouldn't be cruel. They shouldn't be unjust. In fact, they are supposed to be just in accordance to what the Bible considers just. And on top of that, they're not even absolute. So like no aspect of this idea of tyranny that these people are trying to push is true. It falls flat. It's utterly bad. It's corruption. It's awful. So don't fall for it. If you want to do research on this, normally I'd put up a bunch of like screenshots and posts of people being idiots, and there are plenty out there. I just wanted to be able to get another video out for you guys. So feel free to look at my X account, look up tyranny, and or tyranny on a lot of people's accounts. It's been kind of a big talking point the past couple of weeks online, it seems. Or just the comment section in my previous videos and see the kinds of people and the kinds of fruit that are coming out of the people who disagrees with this kind of thing. Notice the interesting tendency to avoid actually discussing evidence and avoid actually offering reasonable argumentation, and instead doing things like name calling and lying and deceiving and things like that. It's just interesting to see the two sides that are being created, because it kind of makes sense when you think of it. If somebody loves tyranny, they're going to be an awful person. And that's exactly what we're seeing. So don't fall for it. There are a lot of, I think, well-meaning people out there who are falling for this stuff. And they shouldn't. Like, a lot of these ideas seem attractive, and they seem like they could potentially be solutions, because, it is true that a lot of our rulers are softer on God's law or on even, the actual law than they should be. But the solution to having rulers that are soft on the law is not to have a ruler that is absolute over the law. That is running light speed and diving headfirst into the opposite ditch. We want to be in the biblical place, where we have a biblical ruler who is actually in submission to God's word, and where the government has very little power to do anything especially outside of what God actually prescribes to the government in the Bible. If we're Christians, and a lot of these people, they profess to be Christians and they don't care about these things whatsoever. So that's something to watch out for too. Anyways, feel free to argue with me in the comments. It will be very good evidence to show people how right I am about this. Feel free to ask questions. And also, another thing, if you notice any other words that people are trying to manipulate and twist, I've already gotten a few ideas from people. I see many of them myself, but I enjoy doing these videos. So feel free to share with me more words that you notice are being twisted by the Marxists. And I would love to make more videos like this about them in the future. Catch you next time.